Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome to another T2 Hubcast. I've got Spencer Locker with me.
Hello.
Welcome, Spence. How are you doing, mate?
All right, you?
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Good.
all good. Can't complain. It's nearly summer. No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's spring, but
Sun's shining, birds are singing.
it's on its way. It's
Yeah.
on its way. So, Spencer and I was chatting, and we wanted to come in and record a short Hubcast, but one which we hope will be of use to people who are wanting to use or have already deployed the Managing Stress in the Workplace Toolkit from the T2 Hub. And I think the reason why, Spence, is because we've built it in a way which it should be self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And the manager guide should give managers all the information they need to get started. But we're conscious that it's not as simple as that, is it?
No, but it's not rocket science either.
No. But if we can give you a helping hand and just talk a little bit around what's in the toolkit and how to get started and just a few tips or a few do's and don'ts, then that might be of value. So the Managing Stress, or the T2 Managing Stress in the Workplace Toolkit, we created it, Spence, because there is a real need for managers on the front line to take a bit of ownership and support. I think the word support people the best they can who may be suffering from mental health, from stress. Doesn't have to be deep mental health issues. It can be someone who's overworked, who's feeling the pressure at the minute, who's in low mood. But how can we support people with their well-being on the front line?
If you remember, if you cast your mind back to when right at the sort of the beginning of the development of this toolkit, I remember that all the people were talking to about mental health issues at work and outside work, because you've got to bear in mind that just because you have mental health issues or stress outside work, just because you go into work, you can't turn it off. It's with you. So in the development of this, we actually found, if you remember, we were talking to some managers who said, we would love to actually help and support our employees, but there's nothing out there. There's no tool, there's no equipment, there's no guidelines, there's no courses for the level of depth or lack of depth, if you like, that you need for support, because everything was either really, really heavy stuff going over 3 years and your manager comes out as a sort of qualified counsellor stroke therapist when they don't actually need that.
And they ain't got time to do that, right? And 90% of their job, 80-90% of their job is not that, right? Yeah. So, and then the other extreme that we experienced was there's plenty of talk out there about being a mental health ambassador or as an organization or supporting mental health and the impact of mental health and how much it costs the economy and companies, and absenteeism versus presenteeism. And there was all this, but we never really felt like there was anything tangible, anything practical. So the reason we created the toolkit was because you don't need to go through that 3-year degree to be able to practitioner in it, but it also is an actionable, it gives managers hopefully a bit of confidence in not avoiding the elephant in the room and starting to feel more comfortable in engaging their employees who may be struggling with the fundamental aim on the front line of applying that first aid or helping them move forward from where they are. And that's what it is. So you'll see in the pack, if we come back to the hub, you'll see in the pack, we have 4 documents, I believe, in the Managing Stress section, which is the manager guide. And we always say step 1, start with the manager guide. The manager guide is written in a way where it's not war and peace and it's not too heavy, but it'll give you hopefully just enough to get the feel for our 5 or 6 step process when it comes to managing stress in the workplace. But what you really need to do for managers out there is you need to focus in the manager guide on basically, almost the first 2 or 3 steps, if anything, which is how do I recognize stress in the workplace? More importantly, how do I conduct the 7-day diary exercise with a recipient? And that's, if that's all you start with, getting used to having the conversations with people, recognizing when someone's struggling, having the conversations with people, and deploying a 7-day exercise where we review this together and see what might be triggering this stress or this anxiety and work together on a plan. That is the simplicity of it, isn't it, Spence?
Yes, it is.
All the other coaching techniques in it and facilitating professional support if we need to, that can come down the line.
Yeah.
We want managers listening to this and using the hub to just get comfortable in going, I need to recognize myself when someone's struggling, but have the open dialogue so that can come forth when need to. But I also want to be comfortable in deploying the 7-day diary exercise with a recipient, and we'll go through the process together.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when it gets to that point where they are looking at when they're looking at suggesting the 7-day work diary to the recipient, actually working through it with the recipient reinforces what it's all about anyway. And with the recipient, I mean, when we start talking about the SAW technique and things like that, I know we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but sometimes actually just sharing that experience reduces some of the stress and the worries by just getting a little bit of understanding. I mean, we talk about mental health in the workplace, and we talk about stress, and one of the common factors seems to be a lack or loss of control.
Yeah.
So when you actually get a little bit of knowledge and you get a little bit of support, you sort of regain a little bit of control. And the opportunity to vent as well, and people are sort of empathetic, sympathetic, call it what you will, and that's you're making your first steps there, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're making your first.
You're
steps.
Offloading, you're getting it out your head, and that's the main thing. That's the biggest relief.
Yeah.
You mentioned the SAW technique there, so before we move on to any of the other documents in the pack, let's stay with the manager guide. Let's stay with the first 2 or 3 steps, and let's talk around the SAW technique, because that's the thing we've developed here, which with the full aim of simplifying this vast spectrum of mental health. Now, if I just explain the SAW technique simply, and I'll bring you in, Spence, on why we do it, is the SAW technique the acronym SAW is an easy thing to remember. And what we're doing, if you look in the diagram of the manager's guide on this, is we want people to work backwards from stress. Stress is a big thing. Stress has a spectrum from minor temporary stress to chronic debilitating stress, right? So stress is a big thing to tackle, and mental health as a big whole is a big thing to tackle. So we need to work back through psychologically back from stress. So stress is the S in the SAW acronym, but the A is anxiety. So if you work back from stress, what causes stress? Anxiety. Anxiety is feelings of danger, threat, worry, consequence, all of these things which starts to bring on the stress response. And as we know, as a survival mechanism, as an animal, that is there to serve a purpose and save our lives when needed.
Yeah.
But in everyday life, in the modern day world, it can take over our lives, from any minor thing posted on social media to that email that's just been landed in my inbox to what so-and-so said to me in the meeting room this morning. Anxiety can grip us for many different reasons.
Yeah.
So anxiety, there's 2 types. So if there's 2 types of stress, which is ongoing chronic debilitating stress or acute temporary stress, then there's 2 types of anxiety. There's, the environment sort of in the moment. My anxiety is being triggered by something practical, physical.
Yeah.
Or my anxiety is an ongoing habitual thing that I've got myself into. And then if you work back from anxiety, what actually triggers anxiety? Well, it's an isolated worry, which is the W.
Yeah.
SAW, SAW. You work back from stress through to anxiety, through to a single worry. And there's 2 types of worries that we list in our kit, isn't there, Spence? Oh, 3. You point at me 3. There is 3. The third one sort of
is an
morphed.
amalgamation of both. Yeah.
So do you just want to quickly or very succinctly just talk about the 2, when we get back to the W worries, what are the 2 types of worries a human being can have, the main 2, and then we'll bring the third one
so
in.
the main 2 basically we've got 2 of the main 2 anyway, both of the main 2.
Both the main 2.
We've got hypothetical worries. So hypothetical worries are these seem to be the ones that cause us most problems, really, because the hypothetical worries are something that could have happened in the past, or could possibly happen in the future.
Right.
So if it's happened in the past, what can you do about something that's happened in the past?
Well, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, so what could you possibly do about things that could possibly happen in the future?
Well, you could do some stuff, but if you just purely focus on it,
then there's not a great deal
you're asking the impossible, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're just trying to predict the future.
So we're talking hypothetical, aren't we?
Yeah, and that's why we call it hypothetical, because it's not it's not a reality. It's I am either dwelling on something that's happened in the past, which you definitely can't control, or I am too focused about something that may or may not happen in the future, which, again, I can't control in the here and now, the outcome.
Yeah.
We'll come to what you can control, but you can't control the outcome you're worrying about.
Yes.
Which causes more worry because you feel out of control.
There we go. There's that control thing coming back in again. But the other one that we use is the practical worry. And the practical worry is what's in the here and now. It's practical. It's addressable in the present. So there's something that's happening that you can identify that's happening in the here and now that is you can action, you can do something about it, you can deal with it. So you have a certain amount of control, don't you? And this is one of the reasons why your practical worry is sort of the bit that you can, I'm worried about this. Can I deal with it now? Yes, I can. I dealt with it. It's gone. Is it a worry anymore? Well, actually,
anxiety subsides.
So anxiety subsides. Whereas with the hypothetical worry, past and future, you can't really do anything about that. And then we did sort of allude to a third worry, and the third worry is sort of it's an amalgamation of the two, in the sense that if it's something that's happened in the past that we can't do anything about it, something that's happened in the future, we can't really do anything about it, but there's something in the here and now that we can do something about that may affect the outcome in the future. And that is what we call a grey area worry, which is basically a blend of the two, isn't it?
And you know what? In a way, we want to make all hypothetical worries practical. If we can wrestle them into that grey area, then that's the strategy. So just let me recap. The whole premise of the Managing Stress Toolkit is centered around the SOAR technique and around establishing with an individual whether their stress is being caused by a hypothetical worry or many hypothetical worries in many people's cases, or practical worries in the workplace or at home or whatever it might be. And they are clearly defined, as Spencer says, by a hypothetical worry is categorized by something that has either happened in the past that you can't control or that you perceive may happen in the future that you also can't control. So the hypothetical worries are the damaging ones, because they're the ones that tend to run riot with us. You know, people listening to this, you can probably imagine things like, my wife's a hypothetical worrier. What if we get on the plane on holiday in September and the plane crashes? What if I'm not around any longer for my kids? What if I lose my job in 6 months' time? So it's a hypothetical worrier drive themselves crazy because they're constantly worried. And because they're not in control, it creates further anxiety, further worry, further anxiety, further stress. And that's how you get yourself into a cycle
catastrophizing.
Of chronic debilitating stress. So, and the practical worry is actually something's happening in the here and now that is making me worry, causing a little bit of temporary anxiety and stress. But as soon as I deal with it, it will subside and pass. Like, for example, we've all had this one in our lives. Shit, my car insurance is up for renewal last week. Or my or my road tax. I've been driving around with no road tax for a week. And then you get this anxiety, this worry. You get straight online, you pay your road tax, subsided.
Done.
So that's I haven't paid my credit card bill and I'm overdue, or whatever it might be. So they're hypothetical and practicals. And what the toolkit does, in a nutshell, is the 7-day diary exercise is the concept or notion that you will ask somebody who is struggling to go away for 7 days and capture their stress and anxieties as they arise and think about what they are worrying about. And what they do is they input it into the diary. So I'm worrying at 10 a.m. on this morning about X. They categorize it practical or hypothetical. They score it from 1 to 10 of how severe the anxiety is, 10 being I can't cope, 5 being it's quite strong, 1 being I'm just a bit unsettled, and anywhere in between. And we get to document this in the moment. So by the time they return in 7 days' time with you, the manager, you're ready to sit down and review the diary and look at the origins and the triggers of stress. That is what we're trying to do here, Spence, at a simple level. Because to your point about grey area worries and practical, we need to, if someone is a hypothetical worries, we need to wrestle back some control. Yeah. We need to get practical and bring it back to the present.
Very much so. Even the smallest amount of control can stop that catastrophizing.
Yeah.
When you start getting into that trap of hypothetical worrying, where there is no control and there's nothing you can do about it. But actually, if you can wrestle back control, if you can say, right, okay, then this might happen in the future. What can I do in the here and now to sort it out, to wrestle back some control? It might only be the slightest thing, but it's one step on that journey, isn't it?
It is. So read the manager's guide first, is what we're saying to people listening to this. You will go through the SOAR technique, stress, anxiety, worries. You will read more about the two types of worry, practical and hypothetical. And you will then see examples of the worry diary. You've also got a separate document in the toolkit, which is the worry diary, which you can download separately and have a look. And that is the document you give to or present to the recipient who you're going to go through this process with, because they're going to take that diary away either electronically or hard copy, and they're going to complete it for a week. So get familiar with that. Now, what's also worth mentioning is it's not all about the bad stuff, capturing the bad stuff. It's also about capturing the good stuff.
Yeah.
So in the diary, you'll see there's a place for positives as well. On day one, you've got a positive section and a negative section.
You can have balance, haven't you?
So as well as capturing worries and scoring them and categorizing them practical, hypothetical, we want to know what makes you feel great. So at what moments in the day do you feel very good and fulfilled and happy? And what was it that made you feel like that? Or what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because as well as coming back in 7 days and reviewing the worries, we want to say, is there anything in here that like sort of counteracts? I'll take that one, Spence. Not time to talk about phones off on a hubcast. Is there anything that counteracts the bad times? So what makes you feel great? Because if it's a simple equation, right? Let's try and take you away from the stuff that is triggering stress and do more of the stuff that isn't.
Yeah.
Right. So we do balance it, don't we, with the positives and negatives?
Very much so. Yeah. And again, it's not too psych heavy. We want this to be something that managers can use, they can deploy in a business environment, in a working environment. So it's not too heavy. It's pretty straightforward. There's not much fluff around it, is there?
Yeah.
And when you actually look at this manager's guide, if you look at the manager's guide alongside the 7-day worry diary and alongside the presentation,
which is the third document in there.
Is the third document in there, then it actually all knits together and supports each other. There's a little bit more detail in the presentation, but we use that as like a basis. Then the manager's guide comes from the presentation, and the 7-day worry diary is from the same place. So it all knits together and it all supports each other.
Yeah. So the third document in there, as Spencer's alluded to, is the presentation. Now, we put this in there just in case you want to, if you're educating managers internally, or if you're doing any presentations, or you're just speaking to people about it, it's a nice visual, a bit of more of a, it's not as wordy as the manager's guide, so you can use that as a resource internally. And the final resources on there are the simulation exercises. Now, we created some very simple simulation exercises just to get, if you wanted to practice in a safe environment as a manager, it talks you through the 3 sort of stages of deploying the worry diary, which is the initial conversation, which says you've recognized someone struggling or they've come to you and said, can I have a word? Yeah. And it's that first conversation. Yeah. So this first simulation says, how do you conduct that? The second simulation is then you're going to go away, come back, introduce the worry diary and set the task for the next 7 days. So it's how you approach that conversation. Yeah.
And it's very important. It's very important for us, for you guys, for people who are actually exploring this. This is how we see it being deployed. And we've seen it in quite a simplistic and straightforward structure. But it might be that somebody comes and sees you as a manager, you haven't got time to explore it. You might sort of say, look, I really want to sort of give you the time and the attention. What we'll do is we'll put some time to one side. We'll meet in 24 hours or whatever. That gives me the opportunity to sort of research what you're talking about, sort of get everything together, gives you time to think. Then when you get together, it might be the second meeting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the meeting that you deploy the worry diary in. because you might, during that second meeting, just talk. It might not be appropriate, but we've put it into this like 3 exposure example, which if it worked like that, that'd be great, but it's not something that's hard and fast, is it, Martin?
No, you're right. And that's a really good point. With all of everything we're talking about, we are giving you the tools and a way forward and a concept. We're teaching you the basics of stress and psychology. We're teaching you the SOAR technique. We're trying to break it down to worries and trying to find out the triggers and the instigators and the origins of stress. So we're giving you a formula, but how you wish to deploy it is down to you. Find your way with it, right? Find your way with it. And the simulation exercises just give you a general idea of how to do these things and what you're likely to face. But the premise of it all is you need to work with people who are suffering from stress and anxiety and mental health, back from the overall concept of stress, back through to anxiety, back through to worries, and try to start establishing whether they are suffering from hypothetical or practical worries or a mixture of both. And where it comes back in the worry diary that there's practical workplace worries that are triggering their stress, then you as the manager can help make some changes around that. Are they sat opposite someone who they don't get on with? Is there a disconnect between them and another employee? Is it their role, the mundane, monotonous, process-driven stuff? Is it the pressure and the responsibility of dealing with financials? From a practical perspective, some stuff might come back in this diary that you, the manager, can support them with and make quick decisions on. The hypothetical ones are a bit different, right? We've got to wrestle back some control and bring it back to the present. But there'll be still some actions and decisions you can help the recipient make that will alleviate those worries. And that's what we're trying to do with this toolkit. We're trying to help you understand the individual by understanding the origins of their stress and working with them on it. So the simulation exercises, check them out, use them, plagiarize them, create your own, whatever it might be. But again, the premise of the whole toolkit is this. If there's anything you take to get started, it's if you know that you have someone in your team or organization who's suffering from any level of stress, worry, anxiety, low mood, mental health, whatever it might be, just start on the front line of opening up, give them a safe environment to open up, and deploy the 7-day exercise. And all you're saying to them at that point is, let's go on a journey together. Let's throw ourselves in for 7 days, capture everything. Don't worry. There's nothing too silly or stupid because here's the other thing. Sometimes people's worries, certainly hypothetically, are far-fetched or, and they get embarrassed to even put that down because they don't want to sit in front of you and tell you some of the things they're worrying about, the extreme things.
Yes.
And you've got to make it okay as a manager and say, it doesn't matter what is in your head or what's causing it, get it down. There's no judgment. There's no, we need to know to the extent of what it is that the way you think and the way it's triggering. And then and only then can we deal with it. And you know what, managers, you've got to make yourself approachable, sincere, to be able to give them the confidence that that's okay. Because when they come back in 7 days' time without judgment, we want to be able to say, do you know what? It's okay. I get it. It's okay. Or I don't, even if I can't get it, I can only imagine what that's doing for you. And therefore we can start to work on some coping mechanisms and some changes, right? And that's the premise of it. And rather than inaction, take some action. And that's what we want, right? If at the end of this worry diary, you think you're out your depth because this is a far deeper issue than I can work with, flag it to HR, or call in some support, or even consider facilitating some professional support.
Very good point.
But you're not going to know until you go through the exercise whether you can make a difference or deal with it.
It's you've got to bear in mind that you're not, as a manager, with however much experience you've got, you're not expected to cure all ills. You're not supposed to be there. You're not there as a faith healer or anything like that. You're not a qualified psychologist, and you're certainly not qualified in counselling or anything like that. But what you can be qualified in is showing a duty of care to the human being who reports into you, and that's what we're trying to do with this, isn't it? And you always call it a triage service. Okay, so if you're a physical first aider, if somebody cuts the finger, you can deal with that. But if somebody cuts the finger off, you can't deal with that, but you know somebody who can, A&E. So this is the same thing.
Yeah.
So when you listen to what people have got to say, there's going to be certain things that you can deal with, and you can probably help them with that. But there's going to be other things that you can't, and that might be the time where you not necessarily pull the eject, but you flag it up to sort of say, look, this needs attention from a professional.
Yeah. And you know, the beauty about this is, not every individual, that i.e. the recipient, who go through a worry diary exercise. I mean, I've done it myself, and I don't consider myself suffering from a mental health condition, but because I'm a busy professional who gets stressed and all the rest of it, when you actually put down your triggers of what causes you stress, some of them are a surprise to you because you're not conscious of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the worry diary exercise allows people for the first time to go, oh, do you know what? I didn't realize that was a trigger. You see patterns. Sometimes you see patterns with the times. We ask the recipients to note the time of day when the worry arises.
Yeah.
If 7 days in a row, your anxiety is at its highest from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. on an evening, when you're sat at home overthinking, or when the minute you lie in your bed and turn the light out and your brain starts popping up, if it's those hours, then there's a pattern. So the patterns give you something to work with, right? And that's the beauty about doing it. But you're right, you know, as a manager, can you solve everything that comes back from the diary? No. Could you solve some of it? Yes. And if not, you're aware of the others and where to facilitate the most appropriate support. And that's what we want managers on the front line to do. We can't just all chuck it over to HR.
No.
Right? So that's the pack in a nutshell. You've got it to use. All users on the hub have it to use, right? We do offer an accreditation day here at T2. If you want to learn more on how to use and deploy the toolkit and go through some of our accreditation, you can do so. You can contact us, or you can contact your hub, your dominant super user on the hub, which is whoever organized for you to have access to it. Or you can just have a go, because you've got access to it. And my first sort of recommendation is have a go, right? Have a go, because it's not rocket science, and there's a level of flexibility there for you to do it in your own way. The premise of it is, don't avoid the conversations. Don't be afraid to attack it. Be approachable. Give your people a platform to come forward if they're struggling, and just carry out a simple diagnostic exercise over 7 days to let's find out the origins of what's happening here.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything to add, Spence?
No, I think that's it covered, really. I just think that it's for people who have no experience about mental health issues or anything like that. I think it's a fascinating exploration of basic stuff. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's effective. And sometimes simple is the most effective. I think.
And that's it.
So,
and we've got to start doing something, and then we'll make, over time, we'll make a bigger difference and a bigger difference. So it's also worth mentioning, just with a minute to go, that we are in partnership with a wonderful technology company called Moodbeam. Moodbeam is a wearable device on the wrist that actually, during the 7-day diary exercise, you can give a device to your recipient where they can subtly click buttons. A button that says, a yellow button which says I feel positive and great, or a blue button which says something's triggered me or I'm feeling anxious. That then records to a phone on your app a trend throughout the day of when you felt low and high, and then you can contextualize it in the diary later on. So the reason why that's important is because if you're in a meeting and you're feeling anxious and there's a lot of people in the room, you don't want to start getting your worry diary out and starting writing in it. Right. So you can just click these buttons on your wrist, on your wearable device, and then you can contextualize it later in the day. And that's a really important thing. We don't want people to miss the opportunity to record how they feel in the moment. So we can provide those devices on demand as well. If you get in touch and you're interested in the Moodbeam device, it will be appearing on the hub shortly as well in the productivity tools section. So you can click through there. Other than that, I think that's, our tutorial for 30 minutes, Spence, on the Managing Stress Toolkit. Have a go. Don't be afraid. Start having the conversations, and slowly but surely, it's like anything, you will get better the more you do it and as time goes on. Spencer Locker, thank you very much.
Martin Johnson, a pleasure.
See you soon.
Cheers.